Ashes and beginnings, the gray dawn spread slowly across the city, a city that only months ago had lived its ordinary, bustling life. Children once hurried to school with backpacks bouncing against their shoulders. The square smelled of cinnamon and coffee. Buses rattled their way through the streets with impatient horns. It had all felt unshakable, permanent, like stone carved into the earth. Now silence ruled the streets, but it was not peace. It was the silence of waiting, a silence that could be torn apart at any moment by the thundering roar of artillery or the whistle of missiles. Olena sat by the cracked window of a half-destroyed hospital wing. Her hands still smelled faintly of iodine and blood. She had not slept the night before, moving like a machine from one wounded soldier to another. Bandage, calm the trembling, inject morphine, a word of reassurance, then on to the next. She was only 24, yet when she caught her reflection in the dust-smeared glass, her eyes looked like those of a woman twice her age. She longed to close them, just for a moment, but she could not. On the other side of the wall, voices murmured, volunteers debating where to find the next delivery of medical supplies. And then, she saw him for the first time that he stood in the doorway, a wooden crate balanced in his arms. His shoulders strained beneath the weight, but he did not stumble. His hair was damp from the morning drizzle, his jacket caked with mud, and yet his presence felt strangely composed, as though the chaos of the outside world could not breach the space around him. Their eyes met briefly, and Olena felt a strange jolt, like a note struck on a violin string deep inside her. She told herself it was only exhaustion, only nerves wound too tight. He set the crate down on the nearest table with a dull thud. "Medical supplies," he said in a voice that carried both youth and gravity. "Picked them up from the checkpoint. Thought you'd need them." Olena rose, smoothing back the loose strands of hair from her face. "We always need them," she replied. Her voice cracked on the last word, betraying the fatigue she had tried to bury. The man offered a small, tired smile. "I'm Mark." She hesitated, then answered, "Olena." There was no handshake, no formal greeting. In times like these, introductions were like bandages, quick, necessary, and immediately tested by fire. Mark had not intended to be here. Months ago, he had been a graduate student in history, poring over dusty manuscripts in the university archives. He had loved tracing the fragile lines of the past, following the threads of forgotten stories. But when the war reached his city, books felt like ghosts, powerless against the roar of tanks. He had volunteered quickly, almost recklessly. At first, he ferried food and medicine. Later, he carried messages. He learned to navigate the checkpoints, to dodge suspicion, to disappear into the ruins when the shelling began. Yet there was something more that had drawn him here today, something that had stirred in him like a shadow whispering from the past. He glanced at Olena again. Her posture was rigid, as if every muscle were a drawn bowstring. But her eyes, storm gray, weary, yet burning, pulled at him in a way he couldn't explain. "Where do you want these sorted?" he asked, gesturing toward the crate. Olena blinked, pulling herself back from the haze. "Over there," she said, pointing to a corner where shelves sagged with half-empty boxes. "We'll check them as soon as possible." Mark moved to obey, his boots crunching on shattered glass scattered across the floor. For a long moment, neither spoke. Outside, the wind howled against the broken windows. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled, or perhaps not thunder at all. Olena finally broke the silence. "You're not from here, are you?" Mark paused, surprised. What makes you say that? Your accent and the way you look at things. Like you're still studying them. He chuckled softly, though the sound held little mirth. I used to study history. Now I deliver crates. I suppose old habits die hard. Olena allowed herself the faintest smile. Maybe history isn't so far away anymore. It feels like it's walking beside us. Her words lingered in the air, heavier than either of them wanted to admit. That night, when the shelling began again, Alina found herself remembering his face. Not the details, not the damp hair or the mud-stained jacket, but the way he had carried the weight without bending, the calm steadiness of his voice. She told herself it meant nothing. She had no space in her heart for strangers, not when every day demanded too much. And yet, when she closed her eyes, she thought she heard a whisper. Not the thunder of artillery, but something older, softer, calling her name through the darkness. She did not know that Mark heard it too. Asterisk, asterisk, the first touch the next morning broke with a thin drizzle, the kind that soaked everything without ever quite becoming rain. The hospital yard was a maze of mud and broken bricks, and Alina stepped carefully across it, balancing a tray of boiled water and the last packet of tea leaves. The smell of damp earth clung to her clothes, and yet she found herself breathing deeper, as though reminding herself she was still alive. Inside the volunteer tent, Mark was already awake. He had stayed the night, claiming he would help carry supplies again at dawn. Alina had not objected. Extra hands were always needed. But part of her wondered if he had stayed for another reason. He was crouched over a pile of bandages, sorting them into neat stacks with a precision that looked almost scholarly. She paused in the doorway, watching him for a moment. "You don't have to do that," she said finally. Mark glanced up, his eyes catching hers. "I like order. Chaos is everywhere else. This is the one corner I can control." She set the tray down and sank into a chair opposite him. "Tea." His smile was small, grateful. "I'd forgotten what real tea tastes like." "Don't expect much," she warned, pouring the pale liquid into tin cups. "It's the last of our leaves. After this, it's just boiled water." He accepted the cup, cradling it in both hands as though it were the most precious relic in the world. Boiled water can still keep people alive. They drank in silence, the sound of distant shelling punctuating their thoughts. Alina studied his face over the rim of her cup. Sharp cheekbones, tired eyes, a jaw that looked like it had clenched too many secrets. "What were you studying?" she asked that he blinked. "Before? Yes. You said history." Mark leaned back, staring at the canvas ceiling of the tent. "Legends, mostly. Folklore. Old manuscripts no one cared about anymore. My professors said I was chasing ghosts." Alina tilted her head. "And were you?" His gaze dropped back to hers, steady and unsettling. "Sometimes I think the ghosts were chasing me." A shiver traced her spine, though the tent was warm from the iron stove. She forced a laugh. "Well, at least they're giving you practical skills now. Sorting bandages." Mark smiled faintly. "Maybe everything is connected. The past always finds its way into the present." The day unfolded with grim routine. More wounded, more crying, more frantic hands trying to hold life together with scraps of gauze and whispered prayers. Alina moved like a shadow between beds, her hands never still. Late in the afternoon, the sirens wailed again. The volunteers froze for only a second before instinct pushed them into motion, dragging patients to the cellar, covering windows with sandbags. Olena grabbed the arm of a young soldier too weak to move on his own, and then the sky ripped open. The blast shook the ground, knocking bottles from shelves and scattering glass across the floor. The soldier stumbled, and Olena nearly fell with him that a strong hand caught her, steadying her before she hit the ground. Mark, his arm wrapped around her waist, holding her upright. For a heartbeat, one impossible, suspended heartbeat, the chaos around them faded. She felt the solidity of him, the heat of his body against hers, the thunder of his heart. Their eyes locked. Another explosion shattered the moment, rattling the windows. Mark pulled her and the soldier both into the cellar, his grip firm, unyielding. Only when the door slammed shut did Olena realize she was still pressed against him. She stepped back quickly, breath unsteady. "Thank you," she managed. Mark nodded, but his eyes lingered a moment longer, as though he wanted to say something else that in the darkness of the cellar, with dust raining from the ceiling and the wounded groaning all around. Olena felt something stir inside her she had not allowed herself in months. Not hope, not yet, but something close, something dangerous. That night, when the bombardment ceased, the two of them sat outside among the ruins. The moonlight filtered through drifting smoke, painting everything in shades of silver and ash. Olena hugged her knees to her chest. "I used to think I'd leave this city someday. Travel, paint, maybe live somewhere by the sea. Now I can't even imagine tomorrow." Mark rested his elbows on his knees, gazing into the broken horizon. "I used to think history was just words in books. But here, every day, I feel it breathing down my neck. Like the past is awake again." She glanced at him, a question in her eyes. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then reached into his jacket pocket. From it, he pulled a small, weathered notebook. The leather cover was cracked, the pages yellowed with age. "My grandfather kept this," he said quietly. "He swore our family carried a burden, an old promise tied to the land itself. I never believed him. Not until recently." Olena leaned closer. "What kind of promise?" Mark flipped open the book, showing her symbols scrawled in ink, circles, crosses, lines that intertwined like roots. They looked older than anything she had seen before, older than the city itself. Her breath caught. "What is this?" He shook his head. "I don't know, but I've started seeing them. Not just here." His eyes darkened. "In dreams, on walls that shouldn't have them, carved into the stones after a bombing, where they couldn't possibly have been before." Olena felt the chill crawl up her arms. The night suddenly seemed too still, the silence too sharp. "You think it means something?" she whispered. Mark closed the book, his fingers tight around it. "I think it's trying to tell us something." A gust of wind swept through the ruins, carrying with it a sound that made both of them freeze. It was not the whistle of distant shells, nor the crackle of falling debris. It was softer, stranger, like voices layered on the air, half whisper, half chant. Olena's skin prickled. "Did you hear that?" Mark's gaze flicked to hers, and she saw the same unease mirrored in his eyes. He nodded slowly. The whispers rose, then faded again into the night, leaving only the echo of their presence. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Finally, Olena whispered, "What if your ghosts aren't just stories?" Mark's jaw tightened. "Then we'll have to face them." Shadows between the ruins, the following days blurred into one another. Endless work, endless exhaustion. Yet beneath the rhythm of bandages, sutures, and the metallic scent of blood, there was something else. A thread weaving tighter between Olena and Mark. Invisible but undeniable, he had become part of the hospital routine now, fetching water, lifting stretchers, even sitting with the dying when no one else could spare the time. His presence was quiet but constant, like a shadow that refused to leave her side. And then there were the symbols. Olena began to notice them too. Faint etchings on broken walls, scratches on door frames that hadn't been there the day before. Sometimes, when she closed her eyes at night, she swore she saw them glowing faintly against the darkness of her eyelids. One evening, after another wave of wounded filled every cot, Olena found Mark outside by the courtyard wall. He was running his fingers over a carved spiral that hadn't existed yesterday. "You see it too," she said quietly. Mark turned, his face illuminated by the flickering lantern. "They're multiplying, faster than before." She stepped closer, tracing the grooves with her fingertips. The stone was rough and cold, but the spiral felt strangely warm, as though the wall itself had been branded. "It doesn't make sense," she whispered. Mark exhaled, his breath white in the cold night. "Nothing makes sense anymore. Not the war, not the bombs, not this. But I think it's connected." "To what?" His eyes locked on hers, steady and intense. "To us." Olena felt her chest tighten, a mix of fear and something else she dared not name. The next night, she dreamed. She was standing in the ruins of a cathedral, moonlight streaming through broken arches. Around her, the air shimmered with voices, whispers in a language she couldn't understand, yet felt deep in her bones. Mark was there too, holding the old notebook. But when he opened it, the pages were blank. "Do you hear them?" he asked. "Yes," she breathed. The whispers grew louder, swirling around them, until they became a single, unified word: remember. Olena jolted awake, her skin clammy, her heart racing. For a moment, she thought the words still lingered in the air of the tent, echoing in the silence. When she stepped outside to breathe, she found Mark sitting against the wall, awake as well. His eyes lifted to hers, and without speaking, she knew he had dreamed it too. Days later, the front line shifted closer. The shelling grew heavier, and the city bled more each night. The hospital tent was stretched beyond its limits, every surface crowded with broken bodies. Amid the chaos, one soldier arrived whose injuries were not physical. He screamed about shadows following him, about voices in the fire. No wound marked his flesh, yet his eyes rolled with terror. Olena tried to calm him, pressing a damp cloth to his forehead. "You're safe now," she whispered, but his gaze snapped to Mark, wild and pleading. "You know," the soldier cried. "You've seen them too. The ones beneath the earth." The room stilled. Mark froze, his hand tightening around the notebook in his pocket. "What did you say?" he asked, voice low. The soldier thrashed, spittle flying from his lips. "They're rising. The old ones, buried under stone, waiting for blood to wake them." Two orderlies restrained him, dragging him to a cot. But his words hung in the air, heavy and raw. Olena looked at Mark. His face was pale, his eyes darker than she had ever seen. Later, when the ward was quiet again, she cornered him outside. "What did he mean? What are these old ones?" Mark rubbed a hand over his face. "I don't know, but the legends I studied, they spoke of guardians or prisoners, beings bound beneath the earth. Stories said they would return when the land was soaked in enough blood." Her stomach turned cold. "And you think this war," he met her gaze, finishing her thought, "is feeding them?" That night, They went together to the ruins of the old library. The building had been bombed months ago, but pieces of the archives remained buried under rubble. Mark was convinced answers lay there. They moved by moonlight, careful and silent. The streets were deserted, the silence broken only by distant artillery. Inside the library, the air was thick with dust and mold. Shelves leaned like skeletons, their books charred or half devoured by time. Mark found what he was looking for in a collapsed corner, a collection of manuscripts bound in faded blue cloth. He brushed dirt from the cover, his hands trembling. "This is it," he whispered. They carried the bundle back to the tent and lit a lantern. Olena watched as Mark opened the first volume. The text was handwritten, the ink faded but still legible. That it spoke of a covenant made centuries ago when invaders had swept across the land. The people had called upon powers buried deep below, trading blood for protection. The bargain had worked. The city had survived. But the cost was a curse that lingered, demanding sacrifice in times of war. Olena's throat went dry. "Are you saying we're living inside a story that never ended?" Mark's eyes were fixed on the page. "No, we're living inside a promise." The weeks that followed blurred into a strange duality. By day, they fought to save lives. By night, they pored over the manuscripts, unraveling fragments of a history no one else seemed to remember, and always. The symbols multiplied. One evening, Olena stood in the courtyard, staring at a fresh carving on the stone well. The spiral had grown into a lattice of lines, forming something that looked almost like a doorway. Mark came up behind her, his breath warm against her ear. "They're getting clearer, stronger." She shivered. "What happens when the doorway opens?" He didn't answer. Despite the fear, their bond deepened. They stole moments between chaos, a smile shared over a tray of supplies, a brush of hands passing a scalpel, a silence held too long to be accidental. One night, after a particularly brutal shelling, Olena found herself in the cellar with him again. The lantern was nearly out, throwing long shadows across the walls. "I don't know how much longer I can do this," she admitted, her voice breaking. "Every day feels like it will be the last." Mark reached for her hand, his fingers threading through hers. "Then let's make every day count." The simplicity of it undid her. She leaned into him, resting her forehead against his chest. His arms wrapped around her, steady, warm, anchoring her in a world that was otherwise collapsing for the first time in months. She let herself believe in something beyond survival, but the whispers returned. That night, both of them woke to the same sound, voices in unison, rising from beneath the earth, echoing through the very stones. Olena clutched his arm, her nails digging into his skin. "They're closer," she breathed. Mark opened the notebook. This time, the blank pages were no longer blank. Lines and symbols crawled across them, forming new patterns, shifting even as they watched. The words glowed faintly, and together they read them aloud without meaning to. "The door is near." The doorway, the ground trembled beneath their feet. At first, Olena thought it was shelling again, but no explosion followed. The tremor was different, rhythmic, like something vast stirring deep underground. Lantern light quivered on the cellar walls. The carvings etched into the stones seemed to writhe, as though alive. "Mark," she whispered, clutching his arm tighter. "It's happening." He held the notebook up, the pages shifting under his fingers, words rearranging themselves into sentences neither of them had ever seen before. "The covenant awakens." His voice was hollow, Distant, as he read the glowing script, Delina's breath came sharp and shallow. She wanted to run, to block it all out, but some deeper instinct told her there was no escape. Whatever this was, it had already chosen them. The tremors grew stronger. Dust rained from the beams overhead. Somewhere outside, dogs howled. And then, with a sound like splitting stone, the spiral carved on the courtyard well flared with light. Olena and Mark rushed outside. The night was alive with strange energy, the air buzzing, the stars overhead dimming as though veiled. The spiral burned golden on the well's surface. The lines shifted, folding into themselves, until a shape emerged, a doorway of pure light, standing impossibly on the cracked stone that Alena's pulse thundered in her ears. It's real. Mark's eyes reflected the glow, wide with both awe and fear. It's been waiting for this moment. The ground quaked again, and from deep within the earth came a sound. Not human, not animal, but something older, layered with countless voices. A chorus of whispers rising into a single resonant call. Enter. Olena staggered back. No, I can't. I can't. Mark caught her shoulders, steadying her. His gaze was fierce, urgent. We were chosen, Olena. Whatever this is, it's tied to us. If we turn away now, we'll never know the truth. She searched his face, desperate. And if the truth kills us? For a heartbeat, silence hung between them. Then he said softly, then at least we'll face it together. Something inside her broke open at those words. The fear was still there, but so was something else. A warmth she hadn't let herself feel in months. A certainty that whatever awaited them, she would rather fall into it with him than walk away alone. Together, hand in hand, they stepped toward the light. The moment they crossed the threshold, the world shifted. They stood not in the courtyard, but in an underground hall vast as a cathedral. Columns of stone rose like trees, their surfaces crawling with the same spirals. The air shimmered with whispers, 1,000 voices murmuring in unison. At the far end of the hall, a great stone door loomed, sealed with chains that glowed faintly red. The ground before it was cracked, as though something inside had pressed against it for centuries. Delina's knees threatened to give way. God. Mark tightened his grip on her hand. No, not God. Something else. They moved slowly down the hall, every step echoing. The whispers grew louder, fragments of words slipping into clarity. Blood. Promised the awakening. Olena shivered violently. She felt as if the voices were speaking directly into her bones. At the base of the stone door, they found an altar. Upon it lay a shallow bowl, its surface etched with the spiral symbol. The notebook in Mark's hands fluttered open. The glowing script formed words neither of them could resist speaking aloud. The covenant binds. Two must bear the mark. Two must awaken the path. Mark looked at her, his expression torn between dread and determination. It wants us to finish what was started centuries ago. Olena shook her head violently. No, we're not. We're not sacrifices. But even as she said it, the air seemed to thrum with expectation, the whispers pressing closer. Mark set the notebook down. Then maybe we don't have to be sacrifices. Maybe we can be something else. He reached for a shard of stone lying beside the altar. Without hesitation, he drew it across his palm, blood welling bright against his skin. He let it drip into the bowl. The whispers surged into a roar. Olena gasped. Mark. He met her gaze, steady and unflinching. It's your choice now. If you don't want this, I'll bear it alone. But I know, This bond was meant for both of us. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. She thought of the endless days of suffering, of the children crying for parents who never came, of the silence after the shelling when the air smelled of ash. If there was even the faintest chance this path could change something, how could she turn away? With trembling hands, she picked up the shard and cut her own palm. Blood spilled into the bowl beside his. The glow blazed so bright she had to shield her eyes. The whispers became a single deafening voice. Bound. The ground shook violently, cracks spiderwebbing across the stone floor. The great door trembled in its chains. Olena clutched Mark's arm as the hall filled with light. For a moment, she thought they would be consumed, but when the brilliance faded, they were standing in the courtyard again. The doorway was gone, the well silent, as though nothing had happened. Only the scars on their palms remained, spirals burned into the flesh, faintly glowing. Olena stared at her hand, trembling. What did we just do? Mark's jaw tightened. We finished the covenant. Chapter 5. Bound by fire, the following days were a blur of both ordinary and impossible. The war raged on outside. Shelling, wounded, endless nights without sleep. But beneath it all, something new pulsed inside them, like a second heartbeat. Olena found she could hear the whispers even in daylight now. Faint, distant, but always there, threading through the silence between explosions. Sometimes they formed words. Watch. Remember. Soon. Mark confessed he felt it too. It's like they're inside us now, guiding us, or watching. One evening, as they changed dressings on a wounded soldier, the man suddenly gasped and clutched Mark's wrist. His eyes widened at the faint spiral glow beneath the skin. You're marked, the soldier whispered hoarsely. The old blood, chosen. Then he fell back into unconsciousness. Olena and Mark exchanged a look heavy with unspoken dread. Later, alone in the cellar, Olena broke the silence. I'm scared, Mark. I don't know if we've saved anything, or doomed us all. He took her scarred hand in his, pressing his lips gently to the mark. Then whatever comes, we face it together. Her throat tightened, tears stinging her eyes. She leaned into him, and this time, when his mouth found hers, she didn't pull away. The kiss was desperate, fierce, a promise carved deeper than words. In that moment, with the world collapsing above them, they found something stronger than fear, love, bound not just by choice, but by fire. The fire within the mark never stopped glowing. It was faint, a subtle shimmer just beneath the skin of Olena's palm, but it pulsed with her heartbeat, as if it were alive. She tried to hide it beneath bandages, gloves, anything. Yet in the quiet moments it always revealed itself. A secret reminder of what had happened in the courtyard. Mark bore the same spiral, etched in identical lines across his flesh. Sometimes, when their hands touched, the marks flared brighter, sending a shiver up her arm. Neither of them spoke of it during the day. Too many wounded, too much death, too little time to breathe. But when night fell, when the cellar became their refuge, the silence between them grew heavy with questions. Do you feel it too? Olena asked one evening, her voice low, afraid the shadows themselves might overhear. Mark nodded. It's like a fire inside me. Not burning, more like waiting. Waiting for what? He looked at her then, eyes dark and unreadable. For us to decide. The words unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. The war showed no mercy. The city endured daily shelling. Soldiers staggered into the hospital with shattered limbs, shrapnel wounds, hollow stares. Olena stitched and bandaged until her fingers went numb. And then something impossible happened. A boy was brought in, no more than 16, pale from blood loss. A piece of metal had lodged deep in his chest, and though Olena and the surgeons worked feverishly, his pulse grew weaker. She pressed harder, willing the life to stay, whispering words she didn't know she knew. Her palm flared with light. The spiral burned against the boy's skin where she touched him. For a moment, she thought the heat would scorch him, but instead, his heartbeat steadied beneath her hand. His color returned, his breath grew stronger. Olena froze, trembling. Around her, the others gasped. Mark, standing in the corner, met her eyes with shock and recognition. When the boy finally slept, safe for the night, Olena retreated to the cellar, her chest heaving. Mark followed her, his voice urgent. "You healed him." She shook her head violently. "No, I, it was just adrenaline or luck. Olena, I saw it." The mark flared. "You gave him life back." Her hands trembled. "What does it mean? What have we become?" Mark reached for her, but stopped short, as though afraid of what his touch might unleash. "It means the covenant wasn't just about awakening something beneath the earth. It awakened something inside us too." Eyes in the dark words spread quickly, too quickly. Within days, soldiers whispered about the medic who could heal with her hands. Some said she was a saint, others a witch. Strangers came to the hospital not for bandages, but to touch her, to beg her to save loved ones already beyond saving. Olena recoiled from the attention, but Mark stood firm beside her, shielding her when the pleading grew desperate. Yet whispers carried further than they realized. One night, as they returned from scavenging supplies, they felt eyes on them. The streets were empty, moonlight glinting off broken glass. But the sensation of being watched was undeniable. That Mark's hand drifted toward the knife at his belt. "We're not alone." From the shadows of a ruined archway, a man stepped forward. His uniform bore no insignia, his face thin and sharp. His eyes gleamed with something colder than the night air. "I've been looking for you," he said softly. That Olena's stomach dropped. "Who are you?" The man smiled without warmth. "A messenger. Let's just say, I serve those who remember the covenant better than anyone else alive." Mark stiffened. "What do you want?" The man's gaze lingered on their palms. "The marks. Proof that the chosen have returned. My masters have waited centuries for this moment." Olena's breath caught. "Your masters?" The man tilted his head, as if listening to voices only he could hear. "They sleep beneath the earth, but not for long. The blood of war feeds them, and with your bond, the door will open wider than ever before." Mark stepped in front of Olena, his voice steel. "We're not your servants. Whatever this covenant is, it doesn't belong to you." The man chuckled, low and chilling. "You misunderstand. You don't have a choice. The bond has already chosen you." He stepped back into the shadows, his voice drifting after him. "When the time comes, you will stand before the door again, and you will serve." The silence that followed was colder than the winter wind. Olena gripped Mark's arm, her nails biting into his sleeve. "Mark, what if he's right? What if we're nothing more than tools?" Mark turned to her, his jaw set, his eyes fierce. "Then we break the story. We rewrite it." His conviction steadied her trembling. But deep inside, the whispers grew louder, and she feared the man's words carried more truth than she wanted to believe. Fire and Kiss the next week brought another storm of violence. The city burned for 3 days, the sky a black veil torn with fire. The hospital overflowed. Olena pushed herself beyond exhaustion, her glowing touch saving some, failing others. Every success felt like a miracle, every failure a curse. Mark stayed close, ferrying supplies, guarding her when rumors turned to threats. Some soldiers looked at her with reverence, others with fear. The line between savior and monster blurred more each day. One night, after hours of relentless work, she collapsed on the cellar floor, sobs racking her chest. Mark knelt beside her, pulling her into his arms. "I can't do this," she gasped. "I can't be what they want me to be. I can't carry all this death." He cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You're not alone, Olena. Whatever this is, the covenant, the power, the war, it's ours. Not yours. Ours." Her lips trembled. "And if it destroys us?" His mouth found hers before she could say more. The kiss was rough, urgent, a clash of desperation and longing. It stole her breath, silenced her fear, anchored her in the only truth that mattered. She wasn't alone when they broke apart. Their foreheads still pressed together, Mark whispered. "Then let it destroy us together." For the first time, she didn't flinch from the fire inside her. She let it burn. The awakening, the marks on their palms grew stronger. At night, Alena's dreams filled with fire and stone, Mark's with voices chanting in forgotten tongues. When they touched, the visions merged. Doorways, chains breaking, shadows rising. The man from the ruins returned. Not in person, but through soldiers' whispers. He had followers, men who believed the old ones would grant power if the door was opened fully. One evening, while searching for supplies, Mark and Olena were ambushed. Three masked men lunged from the shadows. Blades flashed. Fear surged. Then the spirals on their hands ignited. Mark moved faster than thought, his strike knocking one man back with unnatural force. Olena raised her palm, and a wave of searing heat burst forth, driving the others into retreat. Breathless, they stared at their glowing scars. "It's inside us now," Mark whispered. "Not just healing. Power." Olena trembled. "And if we can't control it?" He took her hand, their marks blazing together. "Then we learn. Together." The awakening, the night air was heavy with the scent of burning leaves and wet stone. Olena and Mark moved through the abandoned streets, their senses sharp, attuned to every rustle and whisper. The city was no longer just a city. It had become a labyrinth of omens, each shadow a potential threat, each flickering lamppost a signal. Their hands still burned from the confrontation, the spirals on their palms humming as if alive. Olena paused in a narrow alley, her chest rising and falling rapidly. "Mark, do you feel it?" Her voice was barely above a whisper, yet it carried weight, trembling with something beyond fear. Mark nodded, his eyes scanning the darkened buildings. "The door," he said simply. "It's calling." The word alone made the hair on her arms stand. They had encountered fragments of it before. The whispers, the fleeting visions, the strange compulsion that tugged at their minds. But now, it felt more urgent, more insistent. The symbols on their hands seemed to pulse in response, almost guiding them, like a map drawn on their very skin. As they moved, the city around them shifted. Streets twisted unnaturally, corners bending farther than physics should allow, and shadows seemed to stretch toward them, seeking. Olena reached out instinctively, her fingers brushing a wall, only to have it ripple under her touch like water. "Mark," she said, turning to him with wide eyes. "Everything's changing." He didn't reply immediately. His attention was fixed on a crumbling archway up ahead. Beyond it lay a courtyard, filled with stone statues of creatures that could have been human or perhaps something else. Their eyes seemed to gleam faintly in the moonlight. "We're close," he said at last. "I can feel it here. The energy. It's thick, almost solid." A sudden noise made them jump. Footsteps, careful, measured, echoing off the stone walls. From the shadows emerged a figure, cloaked and hooded, moving with deliberate grace. "Who's there?" Mark called, his voice firm but wary. The figure stopped, raising hands in a gesture of peace. "Do not fear," it said, voice low and melodic. "I am not your enemy." Olena's mark flared instinctively, warmth spreading up her arm. "How do we know that?" she demanded, her voice trembling but strong. The figure tilted their head. "Because I too bear the sign." And as they drew back the hood, a spiral burned faintly on the back of their hand, glowing like embers in the dark. Mark and Olena exchanged a glance. "Another?" Mark murmured. "Yes," the stranger said, "but not like the others. We are few, chosen to prepare the way. The door is near, and those who wish to open it will not hesitate to destroy everything in their path." Olena felt the ground beneath her shift slightly. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. "Prepare the way? For what?" "For the awakening," the stranger replied. "The one who opens the door will summon the old ones. But they are not benevolent. They are hunger and shadow, fire and stone. You have felt a glimpse of them. That is only the beginning." Mark tightened his grip on her hand. "Then we stop them," he said, voice steady despite the dread gnawing at his chest. "Whatever it takes." The stranger nodded. "There is a ritual," they said. "A key hidden where the first chains were broken. Only those marked by the spiral can wield it. But beware, the door tests those who approach. It knows your fears, your desires, your weaknesses." Olena swallowed hard. The memory of her dreams, fire-consuming cities, shadows whispering her name, made her stomach churn. "And if it chooses us?" she asked, voice barely audible. "What if it doesn't let us leave?" "It will test you," the stranger said simply. "And if you fail, the world may not survive." A sudden rumble shook the courtyard. Dust and pebbles fell from the broken statues, scattering across the stone floor. Mark and Olena instinctively raised their hands, the spirals flaring, pushing back a surge of shadow that had poured from the cracks in the statue's bases. "It's testing," the stranger said, voice urgent. "Move now, before it adapts." They ran together, hearts pounding, moving toward a low tunnel beneath the largest statue. The air grew colder, thick with the scent of wet stone and old metal. Their steps echoed, each sound magnified, each breath heavy with anticipation. "Do you trust me?" Mark asked, keeping pace beside Olena. She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the glow of their marks. "I don't have a choice," she said, a small, almost bitter smile forming. "And somehow, I think I'd rather face it with you than alone." He squeezed her hand, and for a brief moment, fear faded, replaced by a bond that neither fire nor shadow could sever. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber, its walls carved with strange runes that pulsed faintly as they approached. At the center of the chamber lay a pedestal, upon which rested an object wrapped in cloth, an artifact older than memory. Radiating a subtle, humming energy, Mark stepped forward, every instinct screaming caution, but also inevitability. "This must be it," he said, The stranger gestured for him to wait. The key, they said. It will choose who can touch it. The spiral will guide you or destroy you. Olena felt a pulse in her palm, a warmth that spread through her body. The markings on her hand shimmered brighter, resonating with the artifact's energy. She glanced at Mark, whose own spiral glowed in tandem. Together? She asked. Together, he replied. They stepped forward, hands hovering above the artifact. The energy surged, a roaring current of fire and shadow, and the chamber seemed to bend around them. The runes flared, revealing visions, cities falling, flames devouring forests, shadows swallowing light that a voice, or many voices, whispered in unison, "Who dares to awaken us?" The spirals on their palms flared, and they felt a connection, not just to each other, but to something ancient and immense. The artifact pulsed in response, a heartbeat of the old world itself, and then pain, a searing, soul-deep agony that tore through their bodies, their minds, and yet they stood firm, gripping each other's hands. The visions intensified: fire, stone, chains, shadows. And in the center, a figure, human, yet impossibly vast, its eyes like molten gold, its form shifting between flesh and smoke. "It sees us," Olena whispered, her voice trembling. "It knows us." Mark nodded. "Then we show it. We are not afraid." With a surge of will, they pressed their hands onto the artifact. Light exploded in the chamber, burning away shadows, igniting the spirals into blazing symbols of defiance and unity. The air shook, the ground quaking beneath their feet, and for a moment, time itself seemed to fracture. And then, silence. Breathless, they withdrew their hands. The artifact lay still, humming faintly, its energy now calmer, as if acknowledging their presence. The chamber's walls, once alive with menacing runes, were now etched with images of the two of them, standing together, hands joined, spirals blazing. The stranger stepped forward, reverent. "It accepted you," they said, "but this is only the beginning. The old ones, they will not wait. And those who seek to open the door fully, they are already on their path." Mark and Olena exchanged a glance, exhaustion and determination mixing in their gaze. "Then we prepare," Mark said. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." Olena nodded, feeling the warmth of their bond, the power of the spirals, and a strange calm settling over her. The door was not yet open, but the awakening had begun, and as long as they had each other, they would not face it alone. Outside the chamber, the city waited, silent, expectant, and alive with hidden threats. Somewhere, in the shadows, their enemies moved, their ambition clear. But Mark and Olena now carried something older, something stronger than fear, a connection to each other and to forces beyond understanding. And the night whispered, full of fire and stone, shadows and light, promising that the next chapter, the true test, was coming. The calm after fire, the city lay in uneasy quiet. The streets, once twisted with shadows and danger, seemed to breathe a tentative sigh. Fires had burned themselves out. Echoes of chanting voices faded into the night. Yet the air still hummed faintly, as if carrying whispers of the old ones, reminding anyone who listened that the world had changed forever. Olena and Mark walked together along the riverbank, the moonlight reflecting off the water like silver shards. The spirals on their palms had dimmed, leaving only a faint glow, a reminder of the power they had awakened and the bond that had formed between them. I never thought any of this could happen, Olena said, tracing her finger over the water's surface, watching ripples spread. We survived. Somehow, Mark smiled, though it was tempered with the weight of everything they had seen. We didn't just survive. We learned, and we're stronger for it. The door didn't break us. It chose us. She glanced at him, eyes reflecting both relief and lingering fear. Do you think it's really over? He shook his head slightly. No, nothing like this ever truly ends. But we know now that whatever comes next, we can face it together. The stranger who had guided them through the chamber appeared silently on the path behind them. You have passed the first test, they said, but the old ones are patient. They wait, watching, and those who would open the door fully, they will try again. Alena's lips pressed into a determined line. Then we'll be ready. Mark reached for her hand, their spirals faintly glowing in harmony once more. Whatever happens, he said softly, we face it side by side. Always. The wind whispered through the empty streets, carrying the scent of ash and rain. Somewhere distant, the ruins of the city held secrets still buried, shadows that still stirred, and doors that had not yet been fully closed. But for now, there was a fragile peace, a moment of calm after fire and stone. And as Olena and Mark walked into the uncertain night, the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next awakening. While they walked forward, together, ready for whatever lay ahead, the spirals on their palms pulsed one last time that night. Faint but steady, a quiet promise that power, love, and courage could endure, even in a world on the edge of shadow.